Think living in a medieval castle was a royal dream. Think again. From straw mattresses that could injure you, to toilets that doubled as anti-siege weapons, and a jester who made fun of ghosts in last season's fashion. This isn't your fairy tale. Stay with me as we uncover the brutally hilarious reality of castle life, from the cold stone floors to the candlelit dungeons. Because once you enter, you won't believe what you'll find next. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, where we peel back the velvet curtain of myth to reveal the hay-filled, bone-chilling, downright ridiculous truth of castle life. Today, we begin at the break of day, when even kings woke up sore, confused, and already regretting their life choices. Let's talk beds, or more accurately, medieval torture devices disguised as sleeping arrangements. Unless you were nobility, your bed was a sack of straw tossed on the floor, usually the same straw since the last harvest festival. It didn't smell like autumn. In fact, some medieval medical texts, yes, real ones, included treatments for straw-related injuries. Imagine explaining to your healer, "I was assaulted by my mattress." If you were lucky enough to be born noble, congratulations. Your hay-filled pain came slightly elevated, in a wooden frame, because nothing says luxury like back pain with a touch of altitude. No digital alarms here. Your morning wake-up call was either a rooster experiencing an existential breakdown, or worse, the castle's designated human alarm. Yes, some castles hired a servant whose only job was to yell at people until they got out of bed. Let's just say, not a popular guy at breakfast. And those majestic stone walls, great at keeping out invading armies, terrible at keeping in heat. Your room, basically a giant medieval refrigerator. Forget pajamas, people slept fully clothed just to avoid turning into human popsicles. What about natural light, you ask? Castle bedrooms didn't have windows. They had arrow slits. These were perfect for shooting enemies. Not so great for finding your shoes. Which brings us to your first daily hazard. Waking up in pitch black with numb legs, you stumble forward, only to violently connect with the local chamber pot. If you're lucky, you hit it with your toe. If you're not, well, let's just say medieval mornings had no reset button. So the next time you complain about your mattress being too firm or your alarm clock being too loud, just remember, your medieval counterparts slept on compost, froze in their underwear, and greeted the day by colliding with a portable toilet. And that was before they even touched the medieval version of soap. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, where cleanliness wasn't next to godliness. It was more like next to impossible. Morning hygiene began with a bracing splash of water, straight from the bucket of despair. This wasn't just cold, it was bone-chilling. Literally, the water might have spent the night freezing solid, because heating it required fire, servants, and a miracle. Now, some fancier castles tried to fix this. They ran water through pipes near the kitchen fires to warm. Brilliant idea, right? Well, those pipes were made of lead. So medieval elites faced a tough choice. Be cold or be slowly poisoned. And now let's talk soap. If you think medieval folks had lavender-scented body wash, brace yourself. Most soap was homemade from wood ash and animal fat. It wasn't so much cleansing as it was smearing the smell of your fireplace all over your body. If you were insanely rich, you could afford Castile soap made with olive oil instead of lard. But one bar cost as much as a whole sheep. Imagine trading your entire salary for the privilege of smelling slightly less like goat. Now, for the piece de resistance, the medieval toilet, or as they called it, the garderobe. Yes, the toilet was also a coat closet. Why? Because people believed that the stench would repel moths and protect your finest silk. Functionally brilliant, hygienically tragic. And where did all that waste go? Out the window, literally. But before unleashing the contents, etiquette required one important phrase, gardes lo. Translation, watch out for the water. This phrase may be the origin of look out below. And yes, some cities had laws requiring you to shout first. A rare example of medieval public courtesy. So the next time you grumble about lukewarm showers or low-pressure taps, remember, your medieval counterpart had lead poisoning, soap made from bacon grease, and a toilet that doubled as a coat rack. all before breakfast. Breakfast in a medieval castle. A time for reflection, renewal, and watching your neighbor eat turnip soup with their hands while yelling at the cook. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, where we prove that history's most powerful people started their day the same way we do, with too much bread and not enough manners. What you ate for breakfast said everything about your status. If you were king, congratulations, you were basically brunching at a royal buffet. Fresh bread, roasted meats, exotic fruits from distant lands, basically DoorDash but with horses. Now, if you were a servant, you got pottage. What's pottage, you ask? Imagine if sadness had a soup. That's pottage. It was a slow-cooked stew of whatever hadn't rotted yet, carrots on their last breath, cabbage with identity issues, maybe a turnip that had seen too much. Forget fine china. In the medieval castle, your plate was a slice of stale bread, known as a trencher. After several days of absorbing grease, gravy, and medieval regrets, the trencher would be handed to the poor. A noble gift, assuming the poor had teeth strong enough to bite through bricks. As for drinks, the castle well was often full of things we won't mention. So instead, everyone drank beer. Yes, even the children. Don't worry, their version was called small beer, less alcohol, still safer than the water, and definitely more fun than dysentery. Forks. Too fancy. Too French. Most people ate with their bare hands, sometimes the same ones they used to do other things. In fact, a medieval dining guide had to explicitly warn, "Wipe not thy greasy fingers on thy beard." In the Great Hall, status wasn't just in what you ate, it was where you sat. The closer to the salt, the higher your importance. Salt wasn't just seasoning, it was power. True story. Records tell of knights dueling for a better seat near the salt. Yes, they were willing to risk death for seasoning. So next time your toast is a little burnt or your latte lacks oat milk foam, remember, your medieval counterpart ate turnip soup on crusty bread, drank breakfast beer, and fought over table condiments, all before noon. If castles were the pride of the medieval world, then they were also its most elaborately decorated compost heaps. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, where history stinks, literally. Let's start from the bottom. The castle floor wasn't smooth stone like the movies. It was covered in rushes, dried grass mixed with herbs, spread out like medieval wall-to-wall carpeting. Sounds cozy. Well, they only replaced it once a year. The rest of the time, they just tossed fresh herbs on top, like spraying perfume on a corpse. Add to that a roaming horde of dogs, cats, chickens, and occasionally cows, all of whom treated the castle like their personal Airbnb. And then there were the falcons, regal, majestic, until one pooped on the pork roast during dinner. No one blinked. It was Tuesday. Stone walls might look majestic, but in cold, damp climates they sweat like a terrified squire. Perfect for mold, bugs, and of course mice. Medieval folks tried to cover it up with tapestries, but those were never cleaned, turning into fluffy biodomes of mildew and mouse condos. Cozy for the wildlife. And then there was the kitchen. Thousands of meals. Zero dish soap. One big problem, rotten food. Burnt pots. Grease fire air fresheners. All waste. Chucked out the window, which created what one chronicler called the castle's personal mountain of interesting aromas. Bon appetit. And finally, the guardrobe castle toilet built directly into the walls, dumping waste straight into the moat or castle base. In summer, that moat turned into a chemical weapon. Some sieges failed not due to military might, but because the smell made attackers flee. So the next time you light a scented candle or complain about a funky fridge, just remember your medieval ancestor lived on a floor of rotting hay, bathed in mold, and ate dinner next to a pooping falcon, all while inhaling the warm summer breeze from the latrine moat. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, the only place where we train you to survive a siege using murder holes, spiral stairs, and weaponized bees. Because in the medieval world, defending your castle wasn't just serious business. It was an extreme sport. Let's start with the arrow slits, those narrow vertical openings in castle walls. They weren't just stylish stone acne. They were designed to give defenders a perfect shot and give invaders zero return fire. Shooting through one of these took serious skill, like threading a needle during an earthquake. Next, we have the murder holes. Yes, that's the actual term used in castle architecture. You know those tiny holes in the ceiling above the entrance? That's where defenders dropped rocks, boiling oil, vials of quicklime, and occasionally a beehive. Because nothing says you shall not pass like fury and stingers from above. The drawbridge was the medieval garage door, but with slightly higher stakes. Its purpose: let in your allies, keep out your enemies. Simple, unless you timed it wrong. One chronicle tells of a half-lowered drawbridge trapping half a cow. The cow survived. The dignity of everyone involved. Not so much. Now let's talk stairs, because in medieval castles, even architecture fought dirty. Castle stairs almost always spiraled clockwise going up. Because most defenders were right-handed. That meant defenders had more room to swing swords, while invaders swinging upward hit nothing but wall. And just to make it more fun, the stairs were deliberately uneven in height, so attackers unfamiliar with them stumbled like drunk geese. And yes, even the children got involved. They were often used as messengers, water runners, or in some cases battlefield jesters. Some even played siege for fun, hurling rotten onions across towers like medieval dodgeball. Castle cleanup was not amused. So next time you admire a castle's elegance, remember, behind those stone walls were deadly stairs, booby-trapped ceilings, arrow slots that demanded sniper precision, and possibly a very confused cow. Because in the medieval world, every corner of the castle wasn't just architecture, it was a weapon. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, where the parties were loud, the games were dangerous, and the food might just explode at any moment. Because while the days were filled with battle drills and bad hygiene, the nights, pure medieval madness. Let's start with the joust, the medieval version of high-speed demolition derby. Knights in armor on horseback, charging at each other with giant sticks, for fun. But they didn't stop there. Oh no, they added blindfolds, rode backward, or even swapped horses mid-round. One chronicler called it the fastest way to test one's armor and one's will to live. Between tournaments, knights and servants alike turned to gambling, a castle-wide obsession. One popular game, God's Dice, because slapping God on the name somehow made betting your tunic spiritually acceptable. Records show entire horses, swords, and months of wages lost in a single evening. Moral of the story: never gamble with a knight who can afford to lose a castle. Every castle had a jester, but don't be fooled by the silly hat. These weren't just clowns. They were stand-up comedians, political commentators, and certified daredevils. A skilled jester could say what no one else dared. One even called the Queen's hair a squirrel's nest of poor decisions, and got a raise. Some jesters earned more than the castle guards, because apparently making people laugh at royalty was a high-risk, high-reward job. Next up, the musicians, also known as the castle's living playlist. They played at breakfast, at mass, during baths, dinner, during arguments. One castle record said simply, "Make them stop, for the love of God." And the instruments, let's just say, the bladder pipe was exactly what it sounds like. Beautiful, not always. Memorable, always. Finally, no medieval party was complete without the show-stopping subtlety. A subtlety was a food sculpture designed to surprise, confuse, or terrify your guests. Yes, that happened. Other subtleties included a knight made of marzipan riding a horse crafted from roasted chickens, or a fish pie with live eels that slithered out onto the table. It was less bon appetit and more may the gods have mercy. So if you ever think your party's getting out of hand, ask yourself, did someone just joust backward into a pastry castle while a jester insults your ancestors? No, then you're not even close to medieval levels of fun. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, the only job board where you might get hired to turn meat for 14 hours, scoop poop at midnight, or sing so your boss knows you're still alive. Because in the castle, everyone worked. A lot. And no one had dental. Let's start with the unsung hero of medieval sanitation. The gong farmer. His job: scoop the castle's toilets by hand and haul the waste away. At night, in silence, Sounds horrific. Sure, but guess what? They got paid really well, because nobody else wanted to do it. Now to the kitchen, where the average castle served up 6,000 calories per person per day. Feeding hundreds meant non-stop cooking, and the kitchen never closed. And yes, roles were specific. There was an entire position for the turnbroche, a child or small servant whose sole job was to sit near the fire and turn the meat spit for hours. One fell asleep once. He made the first ever medieval charcoal steak. Being a guard might sound noble. Sword, armor, glory. But truth is, it was 99% boredom, and 1% running for your life. Some castles even required guards to sing while on duty, just to prove they hadn't fallen asleep. A real entry from a guard log reads, "Nothing happened, except Ralph's singing," which was, frankly, an attack on morale. Every castle had a blacksmith, and they were the medieval equivalent of a multi-tool. He fixed everything: swords, spoons, shields, and sometimes feelings. But blacksmiths had one common enemy: custom orders. One blacksmith's diary says, "Lord wants dragon-shaped door handles again. Dragons don't even exist. Try telling him that." And finally, the lady of the castle, not just royalty. She was the powerhouse behind everything. When the Lord was off crusading or getting stabbed in a neighboring kingdom, she ran it all: accounting, staff management, military planning, homeschooling, first aid with questionable herbs, firing the jester, and then rehiring him the next morning. She wasn't just lady of the house. She was HR, CFO, general, nurse, teacher, and mom. A modern CEO would crumble after 15 minutes in her shoes. So the next time you complain about Zoom fatigue or that your office's coffee machine is broken, just remember, someone in the 1300s had a job title that literally translated to official poop shoveler, and somehow they were proud of it. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, where you don't go to the doctor to get better, you go to test how badly you want to live. Because in the Middle Ages, medicine wasn't based on science. It was based on hope, superstition, and whatever ingredients were still moving. Let's say you've got a pounding headache. Modern you grabs a painkiller. Medieval you're prescribed powdered emerald. Too expensive. No problem. Just use powdered human skull instead. Because nothing says relief like sprinkling ancient bone dust into your fever. That one's easy. Just shave a chicken, strap it to your head, and wait until the chicken looks sick. The logic: the illness leaves your body and enters the chicken. Did it work? Of course not. But hey, now you and the chicken have matching trauma. The favorite cure for everything from anxiety to stubbed toes. Bloodletting. Doctors believed all illness came from imbalanced bodily fluids, so naturally the solution was to drain you like an overfilled wineskin. One night was even bled to reduce enthusiasm. Effective. Technically, yes, just not in a survival sense. And what did they put in medieval medicine? Glad you asked. Dragon's blood, actually red resin. Unicorn horn, usually narwhal tusk. Powdered mummy, no, really, imported from Egypt. And something charmingly labeled mermaid scale. If it sounded magical, it went in the medicine. Side effects, unlisted. Consequences, immediate. Need dental work. In the Middle Ages, your dentist was also your barber. Options were limited: yank it out, no anesthesia, or fill it with molten lead. One knight even had all his teeth removed before battle, just to avoid toothache mid-duel. Heroic, horrifying, and deeply, deeply medieval. So next time you grumble about long wait times or high copays, just remember, your medieval ancestors' medical options were bleed, burn, feed it to a chicken, or try dragon powder and hope for the best. Medicine or madness? Honestly, no one could tell. Welcome back to Medieval Times Explained, where we don't need ghost stories, because the real horror was living in a medieval castle after sundown. Let's start with the obvious. Candles were expensive, like costs a day's wages for a glimmer of light expensive. So when night fell, it really fell. Navigating a castle at night was like playing blindfolded hide and seek with furniture and ghosts. And yes, medieval folks believed in ghosts. Very much. So much so that castles actually kept records of ghost sightings, including what the ghost was wearing. One guard reported, "Spectre in North Tower wearing outdated hose. Recommended wardrobe update. Spectre vanished, offended. Welcome to the only century where even the undead were judged on fashion." Night shift guards had it worst. Imagine walking past a suit of armor, only to find it moved slightly. One terrified watchman attacked what he thought was a demon. Turned out it was his own reflection, in a polished shield. The jester later wrote a song about it. It became a castle hit. But worse than armor, tapestries. Those massive woven wall hangings weren't just decoration. They were medieval mood boards of fear. Some guards swore the tapestries were watching them. Others claimed they moved. Whether it was drafty halls or psychological unraveling, one thing's for sure, no one trusted the fabric. And in the library, you didn't just worry about stolen books. You worried about rats. Reading them, castle librarians recorded that rats seemed particularly drawn to cheesemaking manuals. We can't confirm the rats were literate, but we can confirm they were well-fed. Every creak, scratch, or whisper in the dark, blamed on night crawlers, bats, wall demons, mice, or shadow lurkers, cats, really judgmental ones, terrifying, only if you had an overactive imagination. And medieval people definitely did. But if you really wanted a terrible night, spend it in the dungeon. Most dungeons weren't filled with torture devices, just cold, damp misery and maybe a rat or 12. And here's the kicker. You had to pay for your own food. No cash, no gruel. Some inmates even offered dungeon tours to raise funds. And what kind of crimes landed you there? Unpaid cheese, missing socks, or yes, failing to pay your barber. One prisoner allegedly paid off his debt by cutting other inmates' hair. We call that entrepreneurial trauma. So next time you're afraid of the dark, just remember, your medieval counterpart was wandering lightless halls, being watched by a sentient tapestry, while rats held reading sessions and ghosts judged people's outfits. Dawn breaks, and the castle, tired, smoky, restless, comes alive again. From the frozen bedrooms where nobles stir beneath straw-stuffed nightmares, to the fire-choked kitchens where cooks wrestle turnips like gladiators, to guards yawning atop towers, wondering if this will be the day the goat invades again. Once again, the falcon poops on the roast. The jester mocks a knight's haircut. The gong farmer dons his night bucket crown. The turnbroche turns. The ale flows. The rats attend cheese class. Outside, knights train by arrow slit and murder hole. Inside, the lady of the castle balances books, manages maids, and plans lunch for 200, all while tapestries stare, and ghosts file fashion complaints. The floors rot quietly beneath rushes. The moat bubbles with defiance. The ale is safer than the water, and the trenchers get harder every day. But somehow, through the stench, the screams, the misplaced eels and misfired arrows, the castle runs. It endures. And tomorrow, it all starts over again. History isn't made by lords or battles alone. Sometimes, it's built by the guy who had to clean the toilet at 2 a.m. So next time you pass a crumbling castle wall, remember what once echoed through it. Laughter, swearing, singing guards, and possibly an airborne eel. This was life in a medieval castle. Not glamorous, not clean, but unforgettable.